Salutations! Welcome to another Dreadlocks Q&A episode. This is episode 58. 58th episode of my long-running Q&A series of videos where I answer your questions that have been left in previous Q&A video comment sections. So, first question this week is from rgcthat. Can't really pronounce that as a word. Sorry. Question. I have an undercut and only want to grow the top of my hair out. Can I dread my hair by leaving braids in? Thanks a bunch. Quickly, I will talk about undercuts because they're quite popular at the moment. People want to go from undercuts to dreadlocks. People want to have dreadlocks with an undercut. It's perfectly fine as long as you have long enough hair to form dreadlocks from. You can form dreadlocks from it, and it doesn't matter if there's hair across your whole head or not. You can take an undercut. Well, this is the undercut. You can take the hair that's next to the undercut and form dreadlocks from it, or you can have dreadlocks and have an undercut. The only thing to remember is that if you want to go at some point from that undercut to a whole head of dreadlocks, you will have to grow it out. Growing out hair from shaven, undercut shaven, to long enough to form dreadlocks with is going to take a long time, and so you'll have this sort of weird, awkward, maybe in between period where you have dreadlocks on top and sort of a patch of hair, and there will also be a time when that hair is not quite long enough to form dreadlocks from, but is long enough to start getting tangled up in your dreadlocks, and you might have to start caring for it, a bit like partial dreadlocks. So you just have to be aware of the practicalities of if you want to have dreadlocks with an undercut for the entire period of the dreadlocks. So if you always want to have an undercut, that's fine, but if you think that at some point you will want to have a whole head of dreadlocks, then you may want to consider the practicalities of that. Okay, so main body of the question, can you start dreadlocks by leaving braids in? So this is different from sectioning with braids, because you can section with braids. If you are going to section your hair off, I've seen people who take those sections and turn them all into braids to organize it, and then slowly, one by one, undo the braids, turn it into a dreadlock, undo the braid, turn it into a dreadlock, undo the braid, turn it into a dreadlock, and that can really help the organization and make it easier to work with when you're starting dreadlocks if you have the time to put in all those braids. This is different. This is putting in braids and then just leaving them and leaving them and leaving them in until eventually they form dreadlocks. Now, this is what I was told when I was in high school. When I was in high school, people used to say, to start dreadlocks, you braid your hair, put wax on the braids, and then wait. High school logic. And since I've been blogging like this, I've come across very, very few people who've actually tried to do it. And I've never been entirely sure whether they've tried to do it because it's a good idea or whether they've tried to do it because they've heard the same sort of advice that I was given in high school. I really don't see a great upside in starting dreadlocks from braids, because it's basically like you put in braids, wait for them to fall out, and then they start forming dreadlocks eventually. And I feel like the time where you put in braids and wait for them to fall out is a bit of a waste of time, in that you could have just started dreadlocks from the start and been more confident that they're going to form how maybe you want them to, rather than being sort of knotted up, braided mess. I've only really come across a handful of people that have tried it, and from what I've seen, it's not turned out great, but maybe it's turned out great for someone else, but it's not something that I would recommend. Nekro Nymph asks, question, I use the twist and rip method and they are a little over a week old. I already have a couple loose hairs. Is it normal to have loose hairs this soon? I'm really hoping the knots aren't coming undone. After a week, a couple of loose hairs, like literally 2 loose hairs. Yeah, that's normal. Young dreadlocks are going to be loose, they're going to be messy, there's going to be loose hair. When you start dreadlocks, whether it's with twist and rip or backcomb or whatever, you're only starting the dreadlocks, you're not making finished dreadlocks. They're going to be loose, they're going to be messy. You're just going to have sort of knotted clumps of hair, and it's going to take months for those to tighten and mature and lock up, and in the meantime there's going to be loose hair. If you're only a week in, they're going to get a lot looser and a lot messier before they start to get tighter, and it's just kind of how it is. You shouldn't really be scared by loose hair or loose dreadlocks. It's not something exactly that most people want, but it's kind of something that you just have to get through. Obviously there's a balance between normal looseness and completely washing out, but you'll kind of know it when you see it. If the dreadlocks wash out completely, then they've washed out completely and there's not a lot that you can do, but just general looseness and messiness, as long as the hair is still sort of knotted into clumps, knotted into sections, then you just have to give them time and space. Jolie F. Question, is it bad or not necessarily good to fidget and play with dreads when they're young? Mine are almost a year, but the entire time I've had them, I play with them and twirl them around my fingers and stuff. Just curious if it changes anything with the maturation process. Smiley face. You can touch them, you can play with them. They're child friendly. maybe not, but you know, you can play with them. Just be considerate, consider what you're doing. Don't twist them or pull on them in a way that you feel is like having resistance. So don't twist and twist and twist until they won't twist anymore, because you will pull on the scalp and things, and that's not good. And be careful that you're not pulling out loose hairs or running your fingers through patches of loose hair that have started to knot together, but you can play with them and twirl them. Interaction can help form new dreadlocks or start helping loose hairs knot together and stuff. Just be careful that you're not sort of forcing them to do things that they don't want to do. TieranKarbashewski. Question: I washed my dreads a couple of days ago and now I have paintbrush tips the size of my finger. Is this a good or a bad thing? If you have young dreadlocks and the tips become loose, it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, it's just a thing. When you have young dreadlocks, you can start them as tight to the tips as you want. So I know people will backcomb and backcomb and backcomb until the very last hair and be super proud of how they've got knots all the way from the root to the tip. But when you come to wash them, they will loosen at the tips. Young dreadlocks are going to loosen at the tips, and how much they loosen is going to vary from person to person, but you will likely end up with those originally blunted tips becoming loose. It takes a long time for tips to become properly, maturely locked up, and a lot of people will find that their dreadlocks don't actually become naturally blunt. Some people get naturally blunted dreads, the majority don't. It depends on the hair texture and how the dreadlocks were started. In a lot of cases, I find the people that have actually tried to make the tips blunt will find that it doesn't work out that way, because when you try to make the tips blunt, you backcomb or twist and rip right up to the tips, trying really hard to get them knotted. But you have to remember that twist and rip and backcomb, those knots are not the same as mature dreadlocks. That's just a starting method. So you can backcomb all the way to the tip, but that's not going to make a mature blunted dreadlock, and over time it will loosen like young dreadlocks will, and you can find that it loosens up but not quite enough to give the loose tip space to blunt itself. Whereas the people that have not tried to blunt the tips and, for instance, gone completely neglect, they give their tips a lot more room to move and interact, and they end up having more space to knot in on each other and therefore become more likely to blunt themselves. So I find it kind of funny or ironic that the people that try to get blunted tips can often end up putting their hair in a sort of state that doesn't really allow the tips to blunt properly, and the people that are not really all that bothered about it are the ones that end up with blunted tips. So paintbrush tips are pretty normal. Loose tips are normal for young dreads, and it will take months and months, but you will slowly find that it starts to knot closer and closer to the tip. But there's no guarantee that it will knot and blunt all the way to the tip. Finally, Death Theme 13. Question: how tall are you? Smiley face. I don't actually know. I don't have anyone here to measure me. I don't know where my measuring tape is, but I believe that I am about 175. 175 centimeters, 1 meter and 75 centimeters. I think that's like in the ballpark, somewhere around there. Those are my questions for this week. If you found this video helpful, useful, informative, entertaining, any or all of the above, please click the like button so that I know that you enjoyed it. If you would like to send in a question to be answered in a Q&A video, you can leave it down in the comment section. Please write question at the start of your comment and it will join the queue. If you just want to ask me a question and get it answered soon, straight away, you can still leave it down in the comment section, just don't write question at the start. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you again next time. Farewell!